Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's African Composers interview. We have a guest speaking to us from South Africa today. I will allow the guests to introduce themselves, but before they do, I would like to thank anybody who is watching us now. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for your interest, your support. Feel free to post questions and comments during the interview. We can see that one of you has already posted a comment. Anybody who is going to watch this later as a recorded interview, thank you very much as well. Thanks for your interest in the works of African composers and in this particular platform. So, we are going to turn to our guest for today. Thank you for joining us. I hope you are doing well.
I am very awesome, Doctor. Thank you for having me in this studio. Thank you very much. And thanks to all the viewers for watching us live.
Okay. So, please introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you very much. Speaking is Lunga Nkosinathi Dlamini, born on the 29th of December 1990. Lunga Dlamini hails from Ermelo. Ermelo is in Mpumalanga province in South Africa. I always refer to myself as Umzukulu kaGogo, which means I am my grandmother's grandchild. I consider myself very much fortunate to have been raised by her. May her precious soul rest in peace. My mother's name is Pumzile. She has given birth to four beautiful children. I am the firstborn at home. Pursuing after me are my three siblings, namely Tsepo, Mbali, and Sanele. I love them very much. I love them a lot. Yes, growing up without a father was a blessing in disguise because I did not have that golden opportunity which many have to be raised by their biological fathers. Actually, I don't know my father. I'll explain it as we go on. So, as I say, it was a blessing in disguise to grow up without him as my father because I got the golden opportunity to be raised by my grandmother under Christian ethics. She was a prayer warrior, a lady who taught me that God exists, of which I'll forever be grateful about that. I only got the opportunity or the chance to see my father for the very first time. He was lying inside his coffin, not alive. So there were many questions I wanted to ask him. As a result, he was dead. He was unable to answer those questions. Then I composed a song. Actually, it was not a song by then. Uh, I asked him Ngagwenzani, which means what have I done to you, Father? Then later on, as I became a composer, that question haunted me up until I wrote a solo piece, which is sung by basses. It was the piece that was prescribed last year in the South African Schools Choral, A. Stedford. It speaks about how I grew up, about my father not being part of my life, about the remarkable lady who is my grandmother, who ensured that I grow up. From the year 1997, when I was doing grade one at Pumula Primary School, I started singing in a choir, and that is how I got exposed to choral music or classical music, I can say. As I grew up, I developed an interest in composition. Subsequently, I started composing in 2006 while I was a grade 10 learner at Lindile Secondary School in Ermelo. 2006 will forever be the year I will hold dear to my heart, or I will treasure and cherish, because everything concerning composition started then. I vividly remember how everything started when I first composed my first song or my first piece. The I was singing also in a choir in high school, and that year 2006, there was a song, African song or vernacular song that was prescribed. It was titled Vuguibambe. Vuguibambe was composed by the legendary South African composer, Mr. SBP Mnomia. May his soul rest in peace. After that rehearsal, when our conductor introduced us to the song, I got home very much excited. I asked my granny to buy me a manuscript. Luckily, she had money and she gave me that money. I went to CNA to buy my first ever manuscript music book. Then I came back home later. I copied everything that was written in Nomia's score as it was. Then I can safely say that moment was my baptism moment into the composition world, because the day after or the next day, I started composing my own song, my first song. I then completed grade 12. It was in 2008. Luckily, in 2009, I went to study music at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Howard College campus in Durban. I was majoring in composition and conducting under the mentorship of Mr. S.B.P. Mnomia. It was in 2009 when I met Mr. Mnomia personally, and I was glad because I had finally met the composer of the song that blew my mind off back in 2006 when I copied his song as it was to my manuscript book. Then, that moment, I was introduced and baptized, so to say, into the composition world. Um, I then studied understanding music, the depth of music and everything, and how composition is done, and understanding music into depth. Then in 2010, year 2010, I then revisited my song, which I composed while I was in high school, only to find out or discover that everything that I had composed was a mess, absolutely a mess. Unmusical chord progression, diminished, unresolved chords, very terrible harmony. You don't want to hear that song, dog. Then, same year, 2010, because now I was musically knowledgeable, I composed many songs based on my knowledge of composition, which some of those songs were prescribed in various choral events in the Mpumalanga province. From 2010 to 2011, I was then appointed as a resident conductor of the University of KwaZulu-Natal Choir. I can say 2010 actually was the year of my breakthroughs, as I became also an assistant conductor of my hometown choir, African Serenade Choral Project, led by Maestro Lunga. Many of many of my compositions were premiered by African Serenade Choral Project. I then fully understood that indeed God has entrusted me with a great and special gift of creating classical songs, of which by that I'll forever owe thanks to the Almighty God for that. I am grateful that Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland, was the first neighboring country to prescribe my music for their Swazi Bank choral music competitions back in 2015. Then I was introduced and I was known in another country in Swaziland. Some of our opera singers, some of our South African opera singers have used my solo pieces for their recitals abroad, and my songs are sung in various music events in South Africa. In 2012, I was then honored with an award as a composer by the Sibande District Municipality in Mpumalanga Province. I was again honored in 2019 for being the best composer in the province of Mpumalanga. I was awarded by the Department of Arts and Culture together or in association with Mpumalanga Choral Music Association. Mpumalanga Choral Music Association govern all the music projects in Mpumalanga. From 2012 to 2019, I was employed by the Department of Basic Education and Training, stationed at Lusushwana High School, teaching their creative arts in the GT, both grades 8 and 9, and also teaching English in grades 11 and 12. Then in 2020, early this year, I got employed at Vusa Sizwe Music Academy as a music theory teacher for all music grades. Many people have contributed in my life in shaping my talent as I was growing up and even up to date. I would love to send my special gratitude and appreciation to all of them, especially not forgetting my my primary and high school teachers or conductors who taught me music, because everything started there. The enthusiasm and the love, the passion of music started because they introduced me to music. Most of the time, we forget about our conductors when we have finally reached the top. Special thanks to name a few, Mam SV Mavimbela. She was my conductor at Lindile Secondary School, my first conductor at Lindile Secondary School. And when she went to another school, uh, the new conductor came to take us as a choir. That conductor, I'm grateful to her as well. She is Mrs. Mpofu NG. I thank you. That's basically in an actual about Lunga Nkosinathi Dlamini.
Thank you very much for the introduction that you've given us. Thank you for taking us on a journey of how you started, where you started, and how it is you have become the composer that you are today. Sorry to hear about your father passing away. And I guess I want to talk about the composition that you wrote when you met your
Yes,
father. Yes.
yes,
Um,
yes,
Sorry, carry on.
yes, Doc. Actually, I guess that moment when I saw my father lying inside his coffin, I was very much heartbroken, and I cried so very painfully, sadly so, and I was screaming. The only words I could utter, I said, "Baba ngagwenzani," which means, "What have I done to you, Daddy?" So later on, when I understood composition after varsity, because that thing haunted me. Actually, it haunted me back from primary school. When I was in primary school, I could see some of the responsible fathers coming to school, fetching their children, and I was deprived of such an opportunity. Then that thing haunted me up until I was able to compose. Then I composed a cantata. It's a work, it takes an hour when it is performed. It has not yet been premiered. Uh, then the song Ngagwenzani was or inspired the cantata, because the cantata is about my life journey, how it all started, how my granny raised me, how my mother loved me, my family members, everything is just there in the cantata. It means anyone who'd like to know more about Lunga Dlamini should ensure that the cantata is premiered.
Okay, thank you. That's quite a moving story. And well done for composing a cantata and having the strength to compose a cantata around that subject. You've mentioned your grandmother. In fact, you mentioned how when you were introducing telling us about yourself, you said she raised you under Christian ethics, and you said she was a prayer warrior, and that you appreciate the experience you had and the time you had with her. She influenced you. Uh, can you
Yes,
tell us a little more about this? Did this involve taking you to choirs? Did it involve singing with you? How did she influence you? Was it around music or around religion? Apart from religion, was there anything else?
actually, my grandmother was a lovely singer. She had a wonderful voice. Then my grandmother could sing or would sing lullabies to me before I could sleep. She was very supportive. In the morning every day, she was the one accompanying me to school, to primary school at Pumula. Then, the children tendencies, I would sing very loudly at the assembly. Then when I got home, I would ask my granny, did you hear me singing very nice in the assembly? And my granny with with her loving smile, she would say, oh yes, Lunga, I heard you singing. Sing for Gogo even tomorrow. Then my grandmother was supportive in everything. And also, dog, when she spoiled me in a way. That is why I could not take it last year when she finally passed on the 27th of July 2019. Then I'm still mourning her passing because I miss her every day. She was my everything. Actually, on earth, my life revolved around her. I did not know of any genuine true love except the love of a grandmother.
Okay. I'm really sorry to hear that. Hear about her passing. And I guess that is why I think you said you call yourself the grandchild of your grandmother.
Yes, umzukulu kagogo in isiZulu.
Because of that close relationship. Okay. Uh, so
Yes.
let's talk about your story. You used the expression developed an interest in composition. You developed an interest in composition. Some people develop that interest when they meet real life composers. What do you think specifically? You've given us moments in time where you said, oh, I want to copy what this person did. I really admire what this person did. Was it listening to their works? Was it meeting them? What is that one moment? For someone like me, when I met real life composers, it was wow, these people are not stories, they're real.
Yes.
So, what
They are
was it for
real.
you?
They are for real. They exist.
Yes, yes. When you say
Yes,
I
Doc.
developed an
For
interest,
for yes, for me, actually, I met Mr. SBP Mnomia on paper because in 2006 we were singing his composition. Then during that year, I had not met him personally. Then I met him as a composer on paper. Then, when our conductor introduced us to the song, I was fascinated by the rhythmic patterns of the song, the good harmony, and everything. Then I saw myself and I felt as a composer. Then that is how it all started. Then, luckily, in 2009, I was then accepted in UKZN, University of KwaZulu-Natal. Then that person whom I met on paper back in 2006 finally was my lecturer. Then God, I can say, he works in mysterious ways.
okay. So we understand it's finding out about the works, being excited about music composition, and then meeting the composer. Uh, you studied music composition, but before we talk about that, you, I think you were born in 1990. You said, right?
Yes,
You started composing at quite a young age. Before you
yes,
even studied music composition, you had already started composing. So you already knew from a very
yes,
young
ma'am.
age that this is what I'd like to do. Were there any detractors? Did anybody try to say, "Oh, you're not going to make money from this," or composing is not a serious career path to take? I mean, you went on to study. How was it at the beginning?
Actually, my family were a huge impediment. My extended family members. Then having my grandmother by my side, everything and anything was possible because she gave me that support. She gave me that oomph, that drive, that Lunga, you can do it. You can become whatever you want to become. Go and study music. We cannot all be doctors. We cannot all be scientists, but God has given and bestowed music in you. Go and make what will make you happy, because at the end of the day, this is the life that God has given you, and you should live it to the fullest. So even because I was singing in a choir, I actually had joined an adult choir while I was in grade 8. Then I was singing in an adult choir, African Serenade Choral Project. When we went to to competitions, music competitions, uh, I did not enter the stage because the organizers of the composition of the competitions, basically the National Choir Festival, NCF, wouldn't allow me to enter the stage at such a young age, because in grade 8 I was only 14 years old and singing with adults. And some of the members of the choir will discourage me, saying that, "Oh, Lunga, what are you trying to do? Composition is not for children. Composition is for those type of guys with big tummies, composers, the way they are perceived." So, but with Granny by my side, everything was possible.
Okay. Uh, can you give us a brief overview of your experience studying music composition? What did that entail? Just give us a very quick summary of what you studied.
Yes, I studied conducting and composition at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. It was a great adventure learning about composition, because composition has always been in me, just that I did not know uh, the rules of Western composition and all that, the fugue basis, how to structure harmony, how to write a melody and everything. Then at UKZN, that is where I was enlightened, having to learn also about history of music. Then that enhanced the talent that was already in me.
Okay. You've talked just now, you said something about not knowing the rules of Western music
Mm,
composition. Um,
yes.
okay. Let's talk about your first compositions. I noticed when you were introducing yourself, you said when you revisited them, you noticed some, will I say, mistakes, for example. Um, even though you noticed that there were
Everything
mistakes,
was terrible.
maybe, okay, you say terrible, your first composition. Right. Okay.
Everything from a composer's perspective,
Yeah.
from the eye I'm looking now, everything was just a mess. You would find an interval of a second making a chord. You understand the progression, the harmony, actually it was an SATB song, and each voice part has its own melody that is not related or supporting the other part.
Okay. So I don't know if you can still hear me. Okay. But are you at least pleased that you had that opportunity to grow? That was before you had studied though. So are you at least pleased that okay, you had the opportunity to try something? Did it give you a little bit of confidence when you were much younger to put something down on paper? But very importantly, were any of them performed? I don't think I caught that during the introduction. Your first compositions, were they performed?
No, because my first composition as I say, was terrible, then it is just in my archives. It is only for my perusal, not for anybody else. So the compositions which I composed while I was in UKZN, basically in 2010, while I was doing my second year, then they got performed while I was at varsity. Mpumalanga Choral Music Association prescribed my first SATB song, which is titled Umthombo Wethu, for their competition. It was featured in the vernacular section of the competition.
Okay. You have quite a few people dropping comments, greetings to you, talking about how they've enjoyed working with you or listening to your music. Uh, let's look a little bit at your compositions now in a little more detail. Do you compose mainly for voice? Is there a particular reason why you went down that route, or are you open to composing for anything, any kind of instrument beyond the human voice or apart from the human voice?
I, I, I I started composing basically for voice, knowing that I grew up in church through my grandmother's teachings, and we will sing hymns in church. So I started composing for voice. But as I grew in music, as I grew, yes, in music, I then diverted to write for. I became versatile, so to say. I am now writing for instruments as well. I write overtures. I write um, preludes for piano and flute, etc. So it's not only voice now. I am
Okay.
that versatile composer who'd compose anything.
Mm-hmm. Um, what are your preferred, let's leave the other instruments to one side. What are your preferred languages to compose in?
The language, basically, I've used in all my vocal compositions, I've used isiZulu, and only two compositions are composed in English, of which one of the English composition was once prescribed in Mpumalanga for Mpumalanga roads and safety competitions.
Oh, okay.
It was about, yes.
What are your inspirations as a composer when you sit down to compose? Okay. Or in fact, before you sit down, what makes you go to the table to say, I'm going to compose? And how do you compose? On a computer with paper and pencil? You talked about asking your grandmother years and years ago, right, to get you, I think, a manuscript. So, how do you compose? Take us through the process and what pushes you to the table. Is it when you are commissioned? Is it when something happens? Okay, you talked about the passing of your father. What are your inspirations? What pushes you to the table, and how do you start a work?
Luckily, Doctor, so far I have not been commissioned to write music for any organization. I just composed purely what is in my heart, of which I prefer it the most because it comes from me. Sometimes, whenever you are commissioned, you are forced to write about something that maybe you are not well conversant with, or you have not put your feelings into it. Then most of the time those compositions can become meaningless. But I compose whatever is in my heart. So what inspires me the mostly is nature. Whenever I'm walking around or driving, seeing nature, seeing vegetation, seeing birds and everything. As an artist, nature communicates volumes with me, and I could easily appreciate what is happening. And sometimes, not writing about nature, I can become figurative, because at UKZN, Mr. Mnomiya himself was a poet. He could write very much deep Zulu. So I'm now also a poet, having to meet him in UK. So everything, anything, especially as I said that my cantata is about my life journey. Whatever I went through in life encouraged me to rise above all impediments, above all stumbling blocks and obstacles along the way. So I ensure that I pen down everything. And when I pen down everything, because now we're using technology, I use my computer, but previously I would use that manuscript I was introduced, or was my granny bought it for me. Then yeah, now I can write something on Sibelius, then I hear it, modify before it can reach people's ears.
Okay. And how have you been during this lockdown? Has it impacted you as a composer? Have you continued to compose?
uh Lockdown made me to compose, because music itself is live, I can say. If music can be removed, to me that will mean it is the end of life. So during the lockdown, while I was indoors, I was able to start a musical. As I talked
Okay.
about my work, I have a song title that is titled Utando. It's about love. I have that cantata, which is about my life journey. It is titled Ebenezer. Then now I am busy with a musical, and it's coming quite well because I started it not rushing because of the lockdown. So the lockdown has helped me in a way, because something fabulous and something nice is coming.
Okay. Um, let's let's talk about the fact that you said when you went to university, you were able to study. Obviously, you talked about it being in the Western style of music composition. Uh, are you, as an African, do you sometimes ask yourself if that is the only style there is to compose in, or do you ask yourself if you might want to explore other styles? Nobody is saying that there is anything wrong with the Western style. Beautiful music produced every day, everywhere, throughout history. But do you tell yourself
Mm.
sometimes that, do you know what? Maybe there are other styles, other approaches, other cultures, other methods, and you might want to explore those or even create those or document those. Because you looked at your first compositions and you said, oh, absolutely, they were terrible, they were terrible. Do you know if maybe you were just speaking in your own natural voice, for example, that something that just came naturally to you? You disagree. You still think they were terrible.
They were they were terrible. That is not singable. Okay, Doc. Thank you for that question. It was a blessing me meeting my lecturer, Mr. SPP Mnomiya, because he would always say, we as learners or students, he always encouraged us that we must master the Western style of composition, so that coming from that perspective, we can be able to explore our African originality, referring to the Western side. He would say, know the rules and break the rules. You cannot break rules which you don't know. Know them first, master them, then you will be able to explain every detail whenever you try to break whatever is commonly known as a culture of Western music. Because in our African music, when I write music, I always use glissandis in my music, portamenti in my music, to embrace our African style of doing things.
Okay. So if anybody who is watching this, although I doubt that all I can see all the comments out clearly from people who know you and know your music. But if anybody's watching this, and you'd like to find out more about our guest composer of today, I've put his Facebook link on the screen several times. I will just place it there one more time. I think, yes, you should do what you can to listen to the compositions of our guest composer today. He has some very, very beautiful compositions. And I would like to ask a question about you being quite widely performed. You said you've been performed within South Africa, including by opera
Yes,
singers and even outside of South
yes,
Africa. To have this kind of
yes.
success, there are composers who will live and die, spend their whole lives and not enjoy that type of success. What does it feel like? Because some may say you are at the beginning of your journey as a composer, others may disagree. But you've got all of this success. You've been recognized in your own area. For example, you've received an award. I mean, what does that feel like at this stage to be so highly commended and recognized?
I feel very much humbled. As the Bible says, it says, those who humble themselves, God will raise them up. So I always live with those principles that whatever achievement, whatever successes, whatever good thing I receive, I owe thanks to God. Having been raised by a prayer warrior, I'm also a prayer warrior. I kneel down, I ask God, I even tell God about all my weaknesses. Then, whenever He blesses me, I say, thank you, my Lord. You are worthy to be praised. So I just feel humbled in an actual about about having those achievements at this young age.
Okay, let's talk about the business side of music composition. Now, a lot of people who try to discourage people from composing usually talk to them about the fact that there isn't money to be made from music composition. Have you thought about the business side of things and what kind of support do you get from where you are? Are there institutions, for example, that award funding, that sponsor? Have you looked into that? And what kinds of gaps have you identified that you think would have been useful to you when you first started or will be useful to you now as a composer?
I think, Doc, as I started composition, I was composing just for the sake that I know how to compose. But as I grow up, I also have to put food on the table. Therefore, the issue of composition as a business now comes into place. Then in South Africa, as composers, we are still deprived of those opportunities because even if our songs are prescribed for various music competition, we will fight with the organizers not wanting to pay us as composers. And I find it very much disturbing that, for example, in a competition, a choir with 60 voices would win position one and be awarded with, let's say, 20,000, while the organizers say the composer should just provide the music for the fun of it, for the sake of it. So it is still, yeah, it is still there that we need to improve in that. And it is my plea to all stakeholders, even the Department of Arts and Culture, to see to it that composers are cared for.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Do you collaborate with composers within South Africa and beyond? Do you engage? Have you thought about co composing, or do you think at this stage you'd like to build your own repertoire first and then maybe after a number of years, some years down the line, you will consider collaborating and mixing with other composers from across Africa or even beyond?
Yes, ma'am, I would love to collaborate with other composers, but currently I've started collaborating with our Mpumalanga local composers, the young composers. They are younger than me. Then we come together maybe on a Saturday, compose together, post on Facebook,
That's so
explore,
nice.
teach one
That's really
another
nice.
because I
Okay.
yes, I believe that whatever I I acquired at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, I should plow back to the community. Some of the composers right now, those that are younger than me, have not got or get the opportunity to study music. They just compose because of the gift. Then I remember how I started. That is why I also collaborate with them. Because once you lift somebody up, God also lifts you up.
Okay. Let's talk about the style of music in that some South African composers produce. At least some of what I have seen, I've noticed that some of the music is around history, and some of it takes this form of warrior chants or warrior style music. Okay, now there are those who will, when they think of South Africa, they think of one period only. You, as the South Africans of today, I suppose, if I can put it that way, I don't like putting people into generations, but the generation you fit into, if somebody says to you, write about South Africa's past. What past do you have in mind? What history of South Africa do you have in mind? I've interviewed some South African composers who've talked about the fact that they lived through the apartheid period, which for some of us is just a story or something that happened somewhere. Your relationship with your country, your country's history. What past comes to mind if someone says, let's write the story of South Africa? Is it beautiful past, post apartheid, or what? What comes to mind?
For me, I can say I was born during the times of apartheid in 1990 because apartheid was ended in 1994 in South Africa. But by then, I was very much young.
Yeah.
But luckily, I was raised by my grandmother. Whenever it was time for storytelling, she would teach me, tell me, take me through the journey about what happened in South Africa during the dark times of apartheid. Then, even that I can say I write about it because I know what happened through watching movies, researching, and through what my grandmother told me. So for me, born in South Africa, I guess the past for me specifically or personally is a beautiful past. It's a beautiful
Okay.
past, except the fact that except the fact of coming to face obstacles along the way, but that is our journey as a humankind.
Okay. Thank you very much. Um, Very interesting to hear that you are collaborating and supporting younger composers. We hope to hear more from you. Hope to hear about your engagement, your collaborations across Africa. There are so many composers, both within South Africa and beyond. I wish you continued success with your compositions. You are enjoying quite a bit of success, as I said before. There are some composers who will
Yes,
live for many, many decades and not enjoy anything in comparison with what you have
thank you
enjoyed
very much.
thus far. Do you, I guess we're about to round up the interview. Do you have any
Yes.
suggestions, recommendations, any thoughts as an African composer, as a composer generally, that you would like to share with us today? You've already talked about the fact that you would like organizations, government establishments to support the music industry, to support composers, perhaps with grants, funding, events, locations that people can perform their works in. But apart from that, have you got recommendations, suggestions, outlooks, thoughts that you would like to share with us today? Anything. This is your own free few minutes to say what you think before we round up the interview. Thank you.
Doc, I in South Africa we have many great singers and great musicians, but we lack opera houses. We don't have enough opera houses. My kindest plea to anyone watching and in power is that in each and every province, if they may at least launch or open an opera house and also commission African composers to compose operas, because actually the sky is the limit. We were deprived in the olden days, and even our our composers whom we look up to, many of them, they will write using tonic solfa because they were deprived of the opportunity to know notation, of which staff notation open doors. You can even be able to write rhythmic patterns you cannot notate using tonic solfa. So if opera houses may be opened in South Africa, then I guess as African composers would have made it. Then also, I would love to thank you personally for platforms like this, because we always know about the likes of Mozart, Beethoven, and we can just in a click of a button press Google and know everything about them. But with us African composers, some of us we die not being known that we existed. And after our passing, there is no information archived or recorded where people or the next generation will always refer to know who lived, who wrote what and what. And there are many compositions for that matter written unknown composer, because we don't have our own recorded history.
Thank you very much for those kind words. Thank you for the suggestions. It's good to hear your ideas, your suggestions, and your thoughts on these subjects. I really appreciate the fact that you agreed to have this interview. Thank you for joining us today. Please go online, okay, go to Facebook, look up our guest composer of today. He has some absolutely beautiful works. I believe he will be posting his works on either a website or on Facebook soon, so keep your eye out for him. Continue to follow him, support him, and we look forward to hearing more and more about your successes and listening to more of your compositions being performed. We wish you success. Thank you for your time today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Oh, thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invite. And thank you, I can say, is the best prayer. Thank you for everything, and to everyone who was watching us. Have a lovely, lovely, lovely day.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye, Ma.